Welcome. May I have the notice of meeting statement, Commissioner Thompson?
A news release announcing the date, time, and place of the January 17, 2019 Commission meeting was distributed January 15, 2019 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Thank you. Adoption of agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Sam, could you give us the invocation, please?
Yes. As we approach today's agenda, I ask that we reflect on the breadth and depth of the needs that we must address. Of course, there are the medical, behavioral, social, emotional, housing, and sustenance needs of the individuals and their families who we serve. The workers at all levels of our program experience many of the same needs, and we all need to be valued and supported and to have our needs understood and respected. Additionally, our programs themselves have needs involving funding, staffing, improvement, monitoring, and accountability. Today we deal with many issues impacting these needs. We work at a level of approving policies, reviewing budgets, and spending plans, making decisions which affect who may receive how much assistance or service and when they may receive them. Let us be resolved to personally experience the impact of these decisions we make in a way that leads us to employ compassion, reason, information, and logic in the best interest of everyone we influence today. Amen.
Thank you. Can I have an introduction of guests starting at the front row?
Hannah Vanderbilt, DDSN. Susan Beck, DDSN.
Pat Haley, DDSN.
Lisa Weeks, DDSN.
Chuck Norman, DDSN.
Evelyn Heather McPherson, Richland County. Laura Cole, Richland County.
Rufus Brooke, DDSN. Bob Jones, Newberry County.
Angela Rodriguez, South Carolina Spinal Cord Injury Association.
And George Davis, Brain Injury Association of South Carolina.
This gentleman in this red shirt.
Middleton, DDSN.
Thank you.
Melinda Board, the Arc of the Midlands. Rebecca Godlove, Arc of the Midlands.
Kelly Cox, Lexington County.
Kathleen Morgan, PNA.
Brittany Stevenson, Chester, Lancaster.
Thanks for standing.
Amy Colbert, Connection.
James Mack, South Carolina Autism Society. Daniel Davis, Autism Division.
Richard Johnson, Parents and Guardians Association, Coastal Center.
Suzanne Johnson, South Carolina, Dad and Coastal Center Parents. Kathleen Roberts, Center Parents Club, and South Carolina Dad. Linda Lee, my daughter's at Whitten Center, and president of the Parents Club, and South Carolina.
And Connor Chisler with Aging with Flair, Behaviors a Go-Go.
Anika Robinson, Department of Health and Human Services.
Rebecca Spaniel, South Carolina Lend.
Ray Miller, South Carolina DD Council.
Floyd Warren, Babcock Center.
Sean Smith, Lee County Youth Center.
Cindy Williams, Calhoun County Disability Board.
Mike Moss, Calhoun County Disabilities and Special Needs.
Ben Horner, DDSN.
Tim Newman, a parent from York County. Todd Atwater, Coventry Partners.
Mary Ann Cole, parent from York County.
Dean Red, Dawson County. Jerry Mize, Oconee County.
Thank you, and all welcome. May I have the approval of the minutes of the December 13th, 2018 Commission meeting?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Deborah McPherson. For the public input.
Good morning. Those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it, according to Winston Churchill. Last month, the Commission approved the accountability plan for Mentor and other high management providers. The purpose of this plan for Mentor was to set measurable goals for improvement, which if met would allow Mentor to again admit individuals into their high management vacant beds. What measures triggered the 3 freezes placed on new admissions to Mentor in the past? That seems to be a critical question to be asked before the freeze is lifted. SLED began asking questions about the deaths and referrals to Mentor homes in February 2016. Rick Mundrett with the Greenville News began asking DDSN about South Carolina Mentor and writing his 3-part series that was finally published in July 2016. I began speaking about my concerns regarding the abuse and deaths occurring to individuals with disabilities in Mentor homes in February 2016 and continued until January 2017. I was so concerned about these issues that I sent a letter to Governor Haley on March 8, 2016. Following receipt of my letter, several commissioners were interviewed by the governor's office. These interviews and the assistance of the governor's office led to the involvement of the state OIG in May 2016. I pulled the comments I made at commission meetings from February 2016 to January 2017. I believe my findings point to issues that, if addressed, could have possibly prevented the deaths and abuse that occurred, and I will summarize some of my findings. Window and alarm sensors had not been fixed, allowing an individual to elope without staff knowledge. Medications had not been provided as prescribed for this individual who eloped. Visual staff supervision was not provided. House was understaffed and our staff with fill-in staff member not necessarily familiar with the needs of the individual in the home. Accountability logs were falsely pre-filled that 15-minute checks had been conducted at one of the homes where another individual eloped and was killed. Accountability logs were modified after death of the individual. Dietary precautions and supervision were not followed that may have contributed to the death of another individual. There were continuing unexplained incidents of abuse, including unexplained swelling and bruising experienced by the third individual. There have been allegations of sexual abuse. Electronic monitoring was not installed in common areas in homes of nonverbal individuals where there have been continuing incidents of abuse. In other homes, staff members witnessed beating, slapping, pepper spraying, yelling, intimidation, pushing individuals, causing them to fall, and forcing individuals to sit on the floor with their backs against the wall and their hands behind their heads. But other staff members witnessing this abuse failed to report the abuse. I would encourage commissioners to go back and review the state OIG audit of Mentor. In all 3 freezes placed on admissions to Mentor, DDSN identified a pattern of Mentor consumers not being sufficiently challenged to engage in the world outside of the home with employment, day service, and other interests. According to the OIG audit, Mentor's weaknesses seem to be in the consumer training and development areas, which Mentor was contractually required to provide. I would further encourage the Commission to carefully restudy the accountability plan for Mentor and other high management providers presented last month. Secondly, I would like to express my concerns regarding the DDSN provider where a consumer was found dead in a bathtub recently. According to a phone call I received from a parent who talked with the coroner, the consumer had a history of seizures. If the consumer had a medical history of seizures, why would a staff member leave the consumer unattended in a bathtub? Why did the staff member not administer CPR or attempt life-saving measures? Why was the staff member being allowed to work with expired CPR certification? Another death occurred in this provider's facility in April 2017 when a 55-year-old male consumer choked on cookies. According to court records, 5 years prior to this consumer's death, a swallowing exam had been performed and his doctor ordered that the consumer be on a soft diet, including in particular cookies that had been moistened in water prior to ingestion. It has been alleged that the staff member did not follow doctor's orders in feeding this consumer. A wrongful death lawsuit is pending. It's been reported that the same provider left a consumer who lived at home and attended the day program on the board van 2 days straight in 90-degree weather this past summer. The family member was not told their daughter had been left on the van until it happened on the 2nd day. Following this, the provider threatened to take away the consumer's waiver slot when the family did not send their daughter back to the day program. This provider, in violation of HIPAA, released critical incident reports without redacting consumer names. I've been told that this is not the first time that a consumer has been left all day on the van in hot weather by this provider. What I find most disturbing is these cases concerning this DDSN provider is that we're talking about, not about staff ratios that would have prevented these incidents. We're talking about staff not exercising common sense. You don't leave someone in a bathtub unattended who has a medical condition that may cause them to pass out. You don't leave a consumer on a van all day in 90-degree weather, especially 2 days in a row, which shows a pattern, not necessarily an accident on the part of staff. You follow doctor's orders when preparing feeding a consumer who may aspirate his or her food. Why would the family as guardians, not the executive director, be contacted when their adult child had to have staples put in their head? Rather than threatening to take away an individual's waiver services when their family members left on a van, why would a provider not first offer alternative in-home services and do everything possible to reassure the family that the provider truly cares about their family members' health and safety? DDSN spends millions of dollars on contracts with Alliant, but Alliant reviews missed that a staff member's CPR certification was not current, and it was discovered by a nurse at DDSN, a third of the providers of the state had unlicensed staff administering medications that had not completed medication technician training in violation of state law. Rather than getting upset with me for discussing these recent quality of care issues today, I would suggest the energy be focused on addressing these provider issues. A statement I made in January 2017 at a commission meeting, Governor Haley and several legislators have expressed support for the need to restructure DDSN as a cabinet agency because they feel the commission has failed to provide adequate oversight. There have been too many cases of abuse, deaths occurring to individuals with disabilities, especially young males with autism, that could have been avoided. When the DDSN administration fails to hold providers accountable for providing quality care, then, you have no one, you're sending a message that the conduct is acceptable. Ultimately, our system of care, as well as the individuals, are hurt. Both the Senate and the House have recommended restructuring of DDSN as a cabinet agency. I did not contact legislators asking them to file restructuring legislation. But Senate 325 has been pre-filed by Senator John Scott. It was read the first time on January 8th, and it was referred to the Senate Medical Affairs Committee. There are pros and cons of restructuring, but rest assured, if the General Assembly does not see systemic change and improvement at DDSN, it will be restructured. The status quo cannot continue. Thank you.
Do I have a commissioner's update? Anybody have a commissioner's update? Nope. Policy committee report, Vicki Thompson.
Okay, the policy committee met on Monday, and Sam and I were able to meet, and Chris joined us, and y'all have been sent the policies that were, we considered the recommendations on, and the comments have been received on. And most of these changes are either grammatical or wording changes, or were made to reflect the changes made in the Adult Health Care Consent Act. So that we changed to some other name that I can't remember, but it was the Health Care Consent Act directive that we changed, 53507. So the directives that we are asking you to approve the changes on today are 53514, 53515, 600-05, and 603-03. I don't think I need to read to you since they've been sent to all of you. So unless you want to discuss some particular one, we as a committee would just ask that you approve the changes.
Okay, do I have a motion? So I have you brought it as a motion, so I need a second.
On the committee.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, those three are done.
So we also, I mentioned in this thing, and Mary and I have talked a little bit in email, and that's about it, about the fact that we would like the policy committee to take up progressive action toward providers when there is A&Es, especially those resulting in injuries that appear to be frequent, so that we have a set of, this is what's happening, and this is what the consequences are, and this is what you're going to have to do, and if you don't do it, it will progress to more consequences. So I believe Mary called that a system-wide risk management change. And then Chris had something to add to that, because we also talked about risk management. I was talking about A&Es, but I think you and Mary talked about the same thing, that we might get some help on that.
Right, in terms of a outside consultant to come in and do a complete review of the agency. I think Ms. McPherson said it best. I don't think we, as an agency, can examine ourselves the way we need to. I think we need to take the legislature's recommendations, and maybe we put together a subcommittee. It could be the legislative committee that forms with staff and with citizen advocates the opportunity to solicit proposals from outside consultants to come in and do a full examination of the agency. Look at the legislature's recommendations when it comes to restructuring. Now is the time. We cannot allow these situations to continue, and we can't do it as a commission and staff. We need somebody from the outside working with our citizen advocates who's going to come in here and do a full examination. So I would propose that either the legislative committee or the policy committee take charge of that. I think since it's coming from the legislature, I think it'd be appropriate for the legislative committee to put together that working group.
I would be thrilled not to have to church.
I know you would. I know you would. So if the commission, maybe I don't know if we.
Well, I think that if we don't do it, they're gonna, they have recommended it in 2 different places.
That's right.
And the couple of senators I've talked to, they said, you've got to do it.
And they want action now.
They want action now, the beginning of the legislature,
So we could go ahead and meet before the next commission meeting, make recommendations, and then we'll start to bring consultants in. We'll interview them, look at their proposals. The legislature will fund this. So we have the confidence and their backing, and I think we need to listen to them.
You think that they will give us additional funds?
They will. I had conversations this week.
That was a concern in bringing in more.
That's right. No, this will not have to come out of our current budget. They will give us additional funds to pay for the consultant, and they want this to start now, and I agree with them. Now's the time.
Did they put any sort of, do we have any idea how much a consultant like that might cost?
They said, solicit proposals and then come back to them, let us know how much we need, and then they'll make sure and fund it. So it's that critical. It's risen to that level. And so I think what we'll do is, if it's okay with the commission, the legislative committee will take that over. We'll form a working group with staff, with citizen leaders, and let's just go ahead and do it.
So I guess we need a motion for this? So you've made a motion, do I have a second?
Yeah, make a motion that the legislative committee form a working group of citizens and staff and other commissioners to solicit proposals from consultants to come in and do a full examination of the agency.
A second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. And so you will head this up immediately?
Immediately.
Okay, great, thank you very much. All right. Thank you, I'm so glad that's going to be done. Mary, can we have the state director's report, please?
Sure. We've established provider and agency committees to address significant systemic changes that are on the horizon, like unwinding the bans, divesting the 11% of properties that the agency owns which are operated by boards, switching to fee-for-service for early intervention, moving to the market rate for case management. I see these committees as being task-oriented and long-term, since I think that more issues are just going to come down the pike on us. So conflict-free case management being one that comes to mind. The finance, we've identified concerns to answer for the providers regarding to the unbanding, I don't even think that's a word, spell check never picks it up right, unbanding of band Bs and Is, to talk about bringing those back in to do fee-for-service for those bands, and to what is going to take to transfer that properties that we own. And it really is only 11% of all the properties that are being operated out there to the providers. Case management, we let them have the whole meeting to discuss issues with that 15-minute rate that they are very concerned that their business models are going to be sustainable underneath that rate. And we're going to make sure that we inform HHS about that. They know. They're working on data, so we're going to try to give them a little bit more of what case managers do and see if we can change that mind. But we're also waiting on the Mercer report to tell us what the rate actually is, because they did case management rate study too. The EI group, what we did is we walked through the current billing system because we're getting ready to change them over to fee-for-service. So we walked through the current billing system to help ensure that we're picking up every piece of what they do and what we do to make sure there's a smooth transition for the boards. The QPLs, the private providers, already do retrospective fee-for-service. Now we're going to move the boards from the grant system to fee-for-service. We're expanding our partnerships with DSS. We're developing a protocol to assist them when we have DDSN eligible individuals in APS custody, adult protective services, that we work as a team to find placement for that person so they're not in hospitals for extended stays or in hotels with sitters, trying to make sure that they're placed appropriately. We're still working with the Department of Education. We are continuing to develop the criteria for the DSP certification in the high schools, and we have one identified pilot location, and we're looking at another one, and they're hoping to have that pilot up and running in August of 2019. So we're looking at this fall semester being in there. Since a lot of it runs concurrent with the CNA certificate, it's not going to be that hard to develop. So there's just a few additions that we want to put in there. And I met with ABLE and South Carolina, requested their assistance with the development of an advisory committee for me. However, I don't want to wait. I don't want the committee to be a token committee where I can just say I met with somebody and we got input. I would rather them be a good working group with purpose and structure. So to that end, we're also working on including bylaws and application process and a way for people to roll off and roll on so that we have more folks that are able to participate over time, but yet not have, anybody can be in the room, but when you have 30 people trying to discuss an issue, it's hard to come to a consensus and get some really good information. So we're doing that. We completed agency-wide discussion of the strategic planning process. So basically whatever we did and we talked about in our executive meeting, I brought it down to every person who works here. And we spoke to them. We had a couple large groups come in 2 different sessions and did that. We also completed the risk management training with executive staff, and we will, regardless of what the consultants are coming in, we're already starting. So that's fine. They can also look at what we're doing to see if it would be effective. We'll implement the system-wide review process on January 28th. The training had to occur first before you can actually do the review, so people have to know how to review. The last Monday of the month is going to be the executive risk management review, where we look at our data and see how we can take that data and actually go out and make it actionable. We have not waited. We actually did go and visit the provider in question with the death, and go out there and start reviewing files, talking to staff, seeing how we can make the system tighter. So we already put technical assistance in there. We didn't wait for this. It's kind of hoping the protocols would come out of that meeting, but sometimes you can't wait. And we didn't wait. That process will filter down to the regional centers, where they are going to have to hold their risk management meetings, where they review their programs and their incidents, where we kind of give them a direction or kind of the script. This is what we want you to look at. If diets are an issue, we want them to review all the diet preps for folks. If it is, right now we're seeing a lot of accountability. In other words, how we look at how often we review people. The bathing levels, I agree. And there are things that we are seeing systemically that we need to implement, and that's already being done. So I'm very happy for oversight, but I just want you to I've always run risk management programs wherever I've been, and I have found that missing here. So we're implementing it now. That's going to be done, and every last Monday of the month will be our meeting. If we need more, of course, we can put that together. We're also building teams to be able to go out and do these reviews, and that's another skill we have to teach. So there's a lot of skill building here too, and I would imagine that any consultant worth their salt coming in would say, we have some skill building to do. I would be surprised if they didn't. That's been my observation. I've met with the new chair of the Ways and Means Subcommittee, Representative Bill Herb Kurzman. He is a very nice gentleman. We had a really long talk. He thinks the agency, he's not, I really think that our mission is just, I don't think anybody is saying that our mission is not something that needs to be supported. So I've never encountered that anywhere I've been. And the meeting was productive. We'll present our budget to the full subcommittee on January 23rd at 11 o'clock. Okay?
Good. Right, the Silver Palmetto
Can we
Award.
talk about that subcommittee?
It probably
meeting?
will
Oh,
be.
go ahead. I'm
Are
sorry.
you talking about the Senate,
The Ways and Means
the House
Subcommittee.
Ways and Means? Okay,
Mhm.
and is that on audio?
I would imagine those meetings usually are audio and video.
Should be, supposed to be.
Yeah.
And are any of the commissioners going?
It's going to be a very short meeting, I
I'll
was
most likely
told.
be there.
Okay,
That's my plan.
I was just curious. Be
Yeah,
supportive.
he said we have about 5 minutes.
As I say that, I know I can. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So,
I would love to.
Mary, the Silver Palmetto Award.
Okay. I've got to just read this. This is my first time doing the Silver Palmetto Award. There we go. There's a lot of paper clips on this. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Well, for over 40 years, the South Carolina Commission on Disabilities and Special Needs has presented 2 different awards each year to recognize and honor local governments. The Golden Palmetto Award honors a county government in South Carolina that has demonstrated the most exemplary support for people with disabilities during the previous year. The Silver Palmetto Award honors a municipal government, be it a city or town, for its outstanding support of individuals with disabilities. As we all know, city and county governments must balance many competing needs. Just like everybody else, the needs are greater than the resources. The successful partnerships between our local disabilities agencies and city and councils increase and promote employment and inclusion of people with disabilities. They increase visibility of many contributions made by individuals with disabilities and create opportunities for natural interactions with other people. This fosters new relationships and ultimately, and hopefully, friendships. The Silver Palmetto Award is a way for DDSN to say thank you to municipal governments for their leadership. The 2018 Silver Palmetto Award will be presented February 5th, 2019, during the annual meeting of the South Carolina Municipal Association. Each year, the association is kind enough to allow us time on their agenda to recognize and honor the winner. Nominations for the Silver Palmetto Award come from the local Disabilities and Special Needs Board. When making a recommendation to the Commission, long and short-term support for the people we serve is evaluated with the impact those efforts have made on the lives of people with disabilities. Our recommendations to you, the Commission, for the 2018 Silver Palmetto Award is the City of Aiken, South Carolina. Ralph wrote a very, very compelling letter,
Good.
as usual. I don't think Ralph's here today.
No.
No. The 24-year, well, he was at meetings all day yesterday. For 24 years, the City of Aiken has consistently demonstrated its commitment of work opportunities to individuals we support. The Office of Mayor Rick Osborne, Chief Barranco, and at the Department of Public Safety, numerous DPS officers actively participate in the Special Olympics and the South Carolina Equestrian Games. In particular, the Office of Public Safety is responsive and caring when SLED vets cases involving allegations of abuse in vulnerable adults. In 2018, the City of Aiken utilized one of our work crews to maintain the central downtown Lawrence, the alley, the Newberry streets, and a couple of more streets to maintain this area, so they're putting folks to work. Sidewalks and public gathering areas are clean, tables and chairs are placed appropriately during the games, and it provides a highly visible work site in the heart of the city. The city provides employment at minimum wage or better for 5 individuals. They want to expand the responsibilities of the crew, which will allow additional individuals to be employed. The City of Aiken and its Department of Public Safety partner with Tri-Development Center in our safety prevention efforts. Officers are on hand to educate the public with infant and child car seat events, ensuring proper installation. The City of Aiken actively participates with Tri-Development Center's Safe Kids annual walk to work safety programs, designed to bring parents and student attention to important safety practices. The City of Aiken partners with the center in the annual Halloween activities downtown, where efforts are on teaching children to utilize safe practices when trick-or-treating. Working together, the City of Aiken provides more safety of children at the bicycle rodeos and the prevention of traumatic brain and spinal cord injuries. During the Special Olympics, annual spring games, and the statewide equestrian games, city officials, employees, and others provide assistance to the department. The Department of Safety and officers are servers at the annual Cops and Calabash with Fats Cafe, that sounds like a fun event, to raise money for the Special Olympics. The Tri-Development Center and DDSN value the City of Aiken's partnership in supporting employment and recreational opportunities and the efforts for prevention of disabilities. With your approval, we would like to award the City of Aiken with a 2018 Silver Palmetto Award. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, can I have the Legislative Oversight Committee update? Mary?
Okay. Well, you know, we have two oversight committees seeing us right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to.
Oh, do
okay,
we
what
need
you
a
do?
motion for that?
Yes, you
I'm
do.
sorry.
You do. It's your award, not mine.
I would move to award the 2018 Silver Palmetto Award to Aiken.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great job, Aiken. Right.
Okay. I'm going to go with the Senate Oversight Report.
Yeah.
And I also just, you know, as we go through this, there's a lot of things to keep track of. I think this should be another agenda item on the legislative committee's plate, that they are reviewing this periodically as we go through this to keep it up to date. Not just that it's on here, but that y'all are looking at it to see if there's anything additional stuff that we could do.
Yeah, I think that needs to be done every month. I would also recommend, and I know I've recommended already via email to you, after each of our commission meetings, after your report, that you submit an informational memorandum to both House and Senate leaders, just updating them monthly on our progress.
Okay. Well, and you do know that I have to reappear in front of the House Oversight Committee.
I understand that, but I
Right.
think monthly updates are
It's coming up.
Communication is key with the
Oh,
legislature.
it's not a problem. That's basically my director's report, because those are our roadmaps. So to recap, in the Senate Oversight Report, there's 34 recommendations in the report. 6 are directed at the legislators regarding possible legislation. The 7 are commission-directed recommendations, and then there's 28 specific recommendations to the agency. And many of the recommendations have a pattern kind of overlapping, and we can put them under a small amount of overarching themes, so that we can also include the other system checks that we're doing in there. And so to let you know, we're not just working on the recommendations from the committee, but we have, as I've been here since September, we've uncovered other things that we need to be working on. So the main themes from the Senate report are changing the funding method away from the band into a clearer, easily understandable model, such as fee-for-service or something better than that, but basically true transparency in how we pay for services. And reduce non-productive and sometimes non-friendly communications between commission members. That was one of the recommendations, but I think a lot of that has also resolved itself. Get out of the real estate business, engage problems using policy analysis, and then act to resolve situations in the public domain with more of a thoughtful process behind it and more of a planning methodology to change policy and adapt to various situations. There were some smaller recommendations and generic recommendations, like to ensure successful implementation of TheraP, consumers' use of debit cards, and electronic consumer inventory. These should be placed in a bucket of, basically what we're looking at is organizational weakness from a lack of proactive management. And we've identified additional areas in need of improvement that are not included in either report. So we're just including that stuff in all those other systemic changes we're looking at. All of these issues have a common thread which points to a history of hands-off management and a habit of going with the flow of the status quo rather than proactive, rigorous analysis to seek continuous improvement across the agency. We have an agency-wide training development opportunity here to improve business, the business management abilities of the folks that are in this agency, and to have innovative solutions to longstanding as well as new challenges to the service delivery system. Out of the 6 legislative directed recommendations, there's one we've already started working on, even though it's a legislative where they were going, you know, they said you can have legislation that says you need an advisory committee. Well, I've already talked about that. We're already starting that. If they choose to have legislation, that's fine, but we're not waiting. We're just going ahead. Out of the 7 commission-specific directives, 3 of them are complete. Those include the term expiration notification process, commission training. We have pre-service training modules. We have weekly written updates to the commissioners and training survey available at all times to the commissioners. So anytime you find a topic that you might not be well versed on, you are free to ask for additional training on that. The addition of legislative committee, again, that was one of the recommendations that they have a legislative committee, and we obviously do, so that one's complete. And I was going to suggest that, you know, constant oversight of this report be under that committee. One policy recommendation that is being worked on via the executive risk management team is that we have established a system-wide risk management executive review to institute rigorous incident review, a review system that not just looks at the incident, but looks at how we can mitigate the chances of that happening in other places by making sure we get out information to people and permeate it through the system. In other words, the information is not going to sit with the executive team. It goes out not just to the regional centers, but also to all the providers, so that we have a system-wide risk management system. I've implemented these before, and they are pretty effective when you percolate it down to the person who actually has to provide the service. To suggest a policy that would establish ramifications for a provider who does not meet minimum requirements. This is something we talked about in the policy committee. And there was going to be a recommendation coming out of the 28th meeting saying that we needed that, but that's already done, so we don't have to do that again. The remaining 21 recommendations, which are agency directed, of those 14 have been completed and 7 are in process. Of the ones that are in process, 5 of them have a decision point already made. In other words, we agree with it, we're going to do it. We're just waiting for that joint effort with HHS to come out with when you start talking about funding and how to move forward on that. A lot of that really does hinge on that report when it comes out from Mercer. And we're still waiting on that. The 2 remaining recommendations that are currently in process, one is conflict-free case management. But this is not, we don't fly solo on this decision. This is something that we work with in tandem with HHS. So as we go forward, they slow down on that initiative to make sure the system isn't destabilized by not having enough private providers to send all those cases to. But the other part of this little hiccup here is the rate change. That if we're not careful, that could destabilize the system even more. So we're still meeting on that to try to come to an understanding, but at this point, HHS is pretty, in my mind, determined to go to that market rate to see if that is, you know, the providers are very nervous about that, and I will express that to the HHS director. Okay, conflict-free case management, if we were to occur immediately, it would destabilize the system. There's nobody there to take the cases. But we have to remember that even though boards have 76% of the case management services being delivered, the individuals that get those services have every right to choose whatever provider they want. And there are other providers that are not board providers available. So they do have that right to do that. The second recommendation in process is looking at a provider dashboard. We have that little star rating system, you know, out there, and to see if we can make it more meaningful and consumer friendly, so you don't have to dig down so much to look at true performance. And as we establish our advisory committee, we're looking at the risk management committee, and we review our current list of indicators. That system can be rebuilt based on that. And to be honest, my view has always been, my vision has always been, since they started talking about this, that needs to be some sort of a competency-based system based on all 3 of these things, not just your indicator scores. So we'll be working on that. If you'd like more detail, I do that, but that is basically where we are on those different recommendations. The House oversight, we had 14 recommendations in total from that, made by the subcommittee, and then 2 were added during the full committee process. Those 2 were to put the agency under the governor's cabinet, and the other one was to make all boards state employees. Okay, that's a big chunk of change there. Of those recommendations, 2 were agency directed. One was about basically helping direct care professionals to retain and to hire more. But the way we're handling that is go through the Department of Education and try to set up training that we can get people to choose this profession. Because, you know, if you choose something and not just fall into it, you're more apt to do it well. And then also, we have given a training survey to all the DSPs in the regional centers to ask what they need. What kind of training do they need? And we also sent out a supervisor survey to develop our supervisors better. Retention of employees is usually directly tied to the person who influences their life daily, and that would be their direct supervisor. So if you're going to train one, you've got to train the other. And frequently, our supervisor just kind of plucked out of the rank and put in there, are we supporting them with the proper training to be able to supervise people? Because we all know that supervising people is not an easy task. And also the risk management process to develop and help DSPs understand what they're doing and why they're doing what they're doing. So that if someone sees a dietary order and doesn't think that it's all that important, we have to make them understand why. What is a swallowing disorder? What kind of training do we need to support them beyond their orientation training? And one was commission directed, and that is to look at our regulatory environment. We have a lot of directives to see which ones need to stay updated or go away. And I believe that as we are changing systems of fee-for-service, risk management, whatever we're doing, we're also reviewing the appropriate directives at that time to see, okay, if we're going fee-for-service, is there anything in our financial directives that just not applicable anymore? So we're going through that for you. And those would be brought to the policy committee when it's time to make that decision. And one was they made a recommendation to themselves, and the other 11 were directed to the General Assembly. So that's where we are. Okay.
I appreciate that, and I know legislators will appreciate, you know, the updates. Mm-hmm. When they don't hear things, they get nervous. I would recommend, though, in your monthly update to the 2 committees, include a legislative report card with each of those items, and you can show a green, yellow, red, show them our progress, and then every month, everyone will know and track where we are.
Okay.
So I would include that report card with your memo.
On those 11 recommended to the General Assembly, the legislative committee needs to look at that. Yep. And the commission needs to have a position on it, because from what I've been told, they want to know what we think.
That's right.
Yeah.
Before which goes back to us promulgating regulations.
Yeah, so the legislative committee will go and take a look at each of those recommendations.
Yeah.
And then come back to the full commission with positions.
That's why I was recommending it be on your agenda, because there's so many intertwining things here that are,
and some of these policy things, we can get a check mark by those. We'll come up with something.
Okay. Gotcha.
I don't have a list of what they're asking for a policy on, but there's a few.
There's 3, and I think that they are things that have resolved with attrition on the board, on the commission.
But
if you need a policy.
I mean, are they asking us to do a policy, or are they asking us to resolve it?
No, they're asking a policy on communication.
Communication.
Yeah.
So I think we can come up with something.
Okay.
So we can put a check by that.
We've actually got a few that are already, been recommended, so we can do that.
Okay.
Great. Mr. Chuck Norman can come speak to us about the provider contract increases, please.
Good morning. I'm here to present 3 provider contract increases, and these are primarily for changes in their waivers. Babcock Center's contracts are increasing by $307,270, and that is for a net increase in their at-home waivers. Thrive Upstate is increasing by $332,241, and again, that one is primarily an increase in their at-home waivers. And then Georgetown is increasing by $229,301, and that's for residential vacancies that have been filled. So we need approval for those 3 contract amendments.
Okay.
Questions?
Questions?
Your slots?
I move we approve the contract amendments as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, Lisa Weeks. Congratulations on your new job.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Tab 4 in your binder. Have the agency's budget reports in priority order, and we will report out today what the recommendation is from Governor McMaster when he released the 2020 budget on Tuesday. DDSN is recommending for funding for $750,000 for priority number 3, which is the intermediate care facility ICF regional center rates. And also in priority number 8, $200,000 was approved, was recommended for post-acute rehabilitation with specialized training for individuals with traumatic brain injury or spinal cord injury. And those 2 amounts, $950,000 represents about 4.6% of our recurring budget request that we submitted. Mary's just shaking your head. Also, in the governor's request, he approved a transfer between Department of Health and Human Services and DDSN to cover the mandated rate increases that took place this past July. We had used one-time funding in the current year to cover those expenses, as well as the waiver slots transfer that each agency uses transfer money between the agencies each year to cover those slots. Those are individuals who enter the waiver for the first time. It's a memorandum of agreement between the 2 agencies. Any questions?
So the governor didn't provide anything as far as the workforce side of things on his budget?
No.
How do we have to, how do we have to get him to make him understand that?
What have our conversations been with the governor?
We had a budget hearing in October where
We sat with the staff.
presented to the executive budget staff.
That's about it so far.
And that's
that's
the only time we've
Yeah,
talked?
I have requested a meeting with him. I have not gotten an answer yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let us know how we can help.
Okay. Well, considering that first, the DSP, the final installment of that raise has kind of been a plan, and that, retaining a good workforce has been on the recommendations from the legislators, I think that there's a case to be made for that. Also, the forensic beds, we've been dealing, this week alone, I've had 2 families contact me regarding their young people in their homes, and violence. One, we actually had a gun pulled on the parent, and this is a sad situations. We've got families separated because of the violence we need those beds, and we're not asking for them because we don't have the need, and that is, what I was proud about the budget that we asked for, it was not a huge, gigantic, I want my piece of the pie. It was, this is what the need is, this is what we see. Like the money for the baby net, we know that program's going to increase, and this is the money we need to cover it. And we need those triage beds at the institutional setting, because we just placed someone who's been in the hospital for 6 months, and not in the hospital, just on social hold. So we've got folks that we need to support, and the case can be made with data.
Right. I think this is a classic example, and I know you're going to be taking action on this soon, hopefully to fill our legislative position, but we can't just go to one budget meeting, and expect the governor and the legislature to listen. These are relationships that need to be occurring every day. We need people from this agency over at the State House, talking with leaders, you know, Chairman Ways and Means, with the governor's staff. That's how this works. And you can't just occur out of just one meeting and here's our request and we hope you fund it. It doesn't work that way. And so the good thing is you're going to be taking action here soon so that this agency can have somebody down there and have presence. Because if there's no presence, we're not going to get what we need. That's just the reality. But I think this is
We have
a great
completed
example.
11 interviews, and we have narrowed the field
Yeah,
down.
and
We've
I know
got
you've
some
been
very,
working-
very good
And I know
candidates.
you've been working on that.
Yep, good candidates.
So how soon will we know about that?
Well, the legislative committee is going to help review the applications that we've narrowed them down to, and then we are planning our second interview probably next week. We should have a hire by the end of next week, or an offer made.
Okay.
Statewide items to mention, the governor's budget recommended funding for the 1% South Carolina retirement system and police officers retirement system increases. The 1% increase is about $32.4 million that will be spread across the state agencies, as well as $49.7 million for the employer share of health insurance, as it will increase also in January. And a $200 million rebate to taxpayers. That's part of the budget too.
Wow.
Any questions? Okay, tab 5. Commissioner really had questions.
Oh, no.
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 Go ahead.
Okay, I was just
Continue.
waiting.
Continue on.
Tab 5 is the monthly budget versus expenditure report. As the halfway mark of the fiscal year, approximately 50% in terms of the calendar. We've spent $361.2 million. That's about 50.27%. Of the spending plan that was approved in September, and based on current revenue projections, and we're currently in a deep dive looking line by line at the expenditures and the revenues to ensure that we will indeed make our commitments for the end of the fiscal year, and right now that appears to be the case. We do have some things, some one-time expenditures, a prepayment of $12.4 million to DHHS for our state match, which is part of a memorandum of agreement that although those state match payments occur monthly, we still at the beginning of the fiscal year have to pay that $12.4 million that covers approximately 1 quarter. So those are in the expenditures, even though at the end of the fiscal year, those amounts will come off of the months that we owe them for the match. So it will, that accounts for that 0.27, some portion of it that's overexpended. Also, we had Terry employees that left in June, and our annual leave payout year to date through December 31st was $647,000 for annual leave payout, as compared to the entire fiscal year of fiscal 18 was $740,000. So already in the first 6 months of the year, we've paid out more annual leave than we did in all of last year. Something that couldn't be helped. When those individuals terminated, they were due their annual leave. Fiscal 17, we spent $527,000 in annual leave payouts. When we came to you at the beginning of the year, we estimated that we would have about 1.7 million in revenue available at the end of the year. We're still looking at 1.7 to 2 million. But again, we're in the process of a deep dive, and based on what we can tell, at the middle of the fiscal year, we will meet our commitments. Questions?
Anybody have some questions? Sounds like a whole lot of money.
It does. One other thing I did not point out, we requested for the first quarter $3.7 million for the baby net to be transferred back from HHS. If you'll recall, they moved $11.4 million in state funds for fiscal 19. First quarter, it turned out we expended more in the baby net category So they sent us an appropriation transfer of $3.7 million. So your expenditures are going to include half a year of expenditures, but the budget for BabyNet expenditures that they're transferring back to us only includes the first quarter. So we're in the process now of coming up with the amount that we're going to request from them to fund for the second quarter. So when we meet again next month, that second quarter amount should be in our budget.
Okay.
Thank you for that detail.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. Appreciate it.
Good.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Lisa. That's great. Susan Beck, the analysis of the current waiting list.
Can I say something before Susan starts, if you don't mind? Lisa talked about a deep dive. There's a lot of deep diving going on in a lot of different things, and including our waiting lists, including all the folks that are on our critical waiting list. We are getting to the point where we're going out there to do assessments on them, so we know what folks need. So when providers come to us and say they have a vacancy to fill, we have a better idea of the needs of the folks that are sitting out on that waiting list. That was something that was promised to do a long time ago and has not been done, but we have the tools to do it, and we're going out to start doing that. And again, we're building the teams and the knowledge base to be able to perform those properly. One of the things I asked Susan and her team to do is let's look at the waiting list, because just that number slaps you in the face so hard. Who's on this waiting list?
My son.
Well, yeah, I know, because mine is too. And I think that, but I also know that we've had kids on the waiting list for 7 years, and now we've got them down to a shorter amount of time. But 2/3 of our waiting list are children. And the difference between a child being on there and an adult is that a child, if they're Medicaid eligible, has access to all state plan services, which are all waiver services too, with the exception of respite. So the only service they're not having access to is respite. So there's a difference in how you think about that waiting list. If you know the child can get these services, it's different than saying they're getting nothing. So they have access to PCA, where someone over 21 does not. So that's why we wanted to know and to see if we can provide family sports funds to people that are out there that are waiting for these that have absolutely nothing. So that's why it's important to know who is waiting. Okay, sorry.
No, that was great.
It's just your introduction.
So on page 2, actually the second page, they're not numbered, of your tab 6, you'll see this new chart that I'll be reviewing with you today. That's really the totality of my intent for the presentation today, is just to explain this chart because it can be a little bit complicated. Before I do that, I want to remind everyone that to be on a waiver waiting list, you do not have to be eligible for Medicaid. Eventually you'll have to be enrolled in a waiver. You don't have to be eligible, so you don't have to have the specific target population disabling condition. There's no age requirement, and you can return to that list. If you come to the top and decline a slot, you can go back again. So I'll kind of explain that as I go through. But we wanted to, as Mary said, kind of include this chart ongoing because it better tells the story of what's happening with people while they're waiting. They're not all waiting and not receiving services. So we have kind of a visual breakdown to kind of explain this chart. If you look, I'll go back a second. If you look at the chart, you'll see to the far right remaining on the list. So as we remove a certain line over to the left, like number already receiving services, that number on the remaining list is going to keep going down. So we're just going to keep going down until we get to a truer number of people that may not be receiving any services. Okay, so we've developed kind of a visual representation. So each one of these blue bars equals 100 individuals. So we started out with 14,171 individuals, which is our total count of the IDRD and the community supports waiting list. When we remove the duplication for that, which was on your chart as 4,000, my eyes are not working today, 4,543, about right, then we get down to 9,628. But then we look at 1,787 individuals that are already receiving waiver services. So these people can be enrolled in a CLTC waiver administered by Medicaid, medically complex children's waiver. So they're getting some sort of waiver services. Now these counts again are those people that we're aware of that are getting those services. Then we reduce again. Of those 7,841 remaining, about 1,689 have declined a slot in the past 4 years. So came to the top of the waiting list, offered a slot, made that decision right now, not ready to enroll in the waiver. So they've gone back on the waiting list. And sometimes they do that numerous times.
Why?
It
depends.
It depends. They could be children.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
My recollection is we've studied this before is, 2/3 of the waiting list has been children. So they're not ready to receive services because, again, you could be 3 months old and put on the waiting list. So,
Lori, my son came to the top of the CS waiver list and he got that waiver. And then a month later, he was at the top of the IDRD waiting list. Now, I'm sitting here thinking the only service that he can get at his age, and he was 12, is respite. We don't need vocational supports. And in my mind, I wasn't going to encumber an IDRD slot, which is a high dollar slot. People get more services. So I put him back at the bottom of that waiting list so that by the time that he got to be of that age where he would need vocational services and the IDRD came up, I would accept it. When my 21-year-old got that slot, I accepted the IDRD slot for her and transferred her off of one list. So she didn't go back on a waiting list. But JT is now receiving a waiver, so he's in that 1,700. He's got a waiver, but he's on that IDRD. And that's just the nature of the slot, of the list.
That makes total sense to me, but that seems like a really high number of people declining slots, most of whom.
Could be for this reason. And yeah, and a lot of people that I've been talking to groups, I'm part of a group in Charleston of like kind of a Down syndrome support group. And when I talk to those families, it's like, well, they're 4 years old and I get a babysitter, or they don't want respite. And that's the only service, but they don't want to get off the waiting list because they know it takes a long time to get back on. It's a surprising number of people. And then some are in the CLTC waiver and they want to stay there. And they don't want the CSW slot till they can have the IDRD slot.
Is there any way we can break this out on another chart by age?
Probably. We just did under 21 just to do the children.
Yeah, but I mean, but it would be nice to see the ages of everyone on that list.
I guess we can probably drill into it. Yeah, that's one of the easier things to get.
Yeah.
Finding out who's on the CLTC waiver is harder.
Yeah, to see age-wise where people are.
Well, when we go forward with this, this is their first.
Well.
Yeah, well, this is the first crack at breaking down this list. This is the first time we've seen it like this. The next part is we want to analyze what services are needed in the future. So to do that, we will need to have the ages. And then we're going to have to actually name who these people are and start asking that question. I would like to envision that when you get put on the waiting list, you give us some information as to what services you foresee that your family member is going to need. It actually used to be that way. We didn't just chuck people on the waiting list. We used to have to write down why. So we're going to have to capture that information. So right now what we're doing is seeing what kind of information we can pull from what we gather, and then what systems need to be built to get the information that we will eventually need. Like I said, we collect a lot of data. Sometimes it's not always the data we need.
Why do we settle on 4 years as far as the look on this particular group? It's a decline over the last 4 years.
Just the way she did it.
I'm sorry.
That's the weight of the IDRD waiver right now, so we went back.
So, okay, so over one cycle, I got you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so as we keep moving, we're down to 6,152 people remaining. 897 of those are closed in the DDSN system. And you're going to say, why are they on the waiting list? They're closed in the DDSN system. What does that mean? So they've been determined not eligible. Remember, you didn't have to get eligible to get on the waiting list. And at the time you're determined ineligible, you may still want to stay on because you may think later on I may be eligible. Maybe I could have that reconsidered or something will change. So people are staying on there. Now we're going to be looking at how to clean that list a little bit more intensively in the future, but right now they're there. They might have said they don't want services, or they moved out of state, or something else happened with them, but they're still showing up in this number. So we're down to 5,255. And then 2,766 are under 21 years old with active Medicaid. So those people, those children, those youth, they're receiving school-age services, and if they're Medicaid eligible, they have, again, their active Medicaid, then they have access to any of those state plan services. So they're getting the access to those services.
So the point you made about that the only thing they can't get is respite, I thought by definition, how can they get personal care assistance under the Medicaid state plan? Because I thought by definition, the only things that could be delivered through the state plan are medical assistance, you know, medically necessary services, and waivers are specifically for things that can't be, that are not medical assistance. So it's by definition supposed to be two different things.
No, it's a state plan service. Personal care aids for children is a state plan service. And DDSN, and so is nursing services for children, and so is incontinence supplies.
Is it?
That's for everyone, right?
The
Incontinence supplies.
same personal care assistance as what you get under the waiver?
Yes.
It is.
That is so interesting.
And why it comes on the waiver is because it's specific to children. So our population frequently, if you need that personal care assistance as a child, you very well could need it as an adult. So at age 21, when you go into those adult services where PCA is not a state plan service, our waiver continues that service. Okay?
Okay, thanks.
So that's when you see as state plan services change. Remember, I think last month or the month before, I talked about the prescription benefit changing, and so we're taking it out of the waiver because it was in state plan. So you see a little bit of that shifting. So if something's offered in state plan, that's the exact same service for the exact same service group, then it would come off of the waiver. It would be offered as well.
That's exactly my point, though, is that it's not supposed to be in both if it's the exact same service.
But I think that's your explanation.
Yeah, but it's got to be if it's state plan, it cannot be in the waiver.
Right.
Yeah. You can have stuff that's in the waiver that's not on state plan. That's fine. That's how you design it. But if they decide to put that on the state plan, it's just like incontinence supplies used to be in the waiver. And they decided to put that in state plan. Yes, exactly. The whole waiver disappeared because of it.
Because ABA is now a state plan service. So, but that was my question, is how can PCA then be both?
It's not, it's only PCA in the waiver is only available to people over 21, to adults. It's not available to children.
PCA in the waiver is not available to children.
No, because they get it on the state plan.
They get it on the state.
It's children's personal care in the state plan, correct?
Yes.
And then you're saying it's more like adult personal care in the waiver.
Okay.
I
guess I mean, my son gets personal care assistance. I thought he was getting it through the waiver.
No, he's getting it through. But you know where the confusion is? I know where it is. Okay. You can only have one case manager. So if the child does not have a waiver, CLTC is authorizing that service for them. But since the child's going to have a waiver, they need our case manager to manage the waiver. Then we start authorizing the PCA services. So I think maybe a lot of folks think it's waiver service, but it is not.
Okay.
And we did this week.
Yes, we did.
It seems like it's a waiver, but it's not. Okay, so we're dwindling, our number's shrinking. 2,489 remaining, 988 of which are under 21 with no Medicaid, but are DDSN eligible. So if they're DDSN eligible, they could qualify for TEFRA Medicaid, which again, you know, is
possibly
a lengthy process at times, but that's possible. Then they could get access to state plan services that way, and then they would have that full array.
And then we can also reach out to those families specifically and talk about things like family support funds, because they would be eligible for that.
Right. Okay. So that's sort of our breakdown. That gives you a little bit more detail. And again, we'll look at it and see if we can do a little bit more tweaking to give you more information about specific age groups. But I wanted to highlight that for today.
This is helpful though. This is a good chart.
We're still working on it.
Oh, I know.
This is the first crack.
Good.
Well, it's really important that we know who is looking out there for our services. We got to go beyond that. We got to look at demographics in the state to see who potentially will be on this list. That's the step after that.
Yes.
There needs to be a way of people, you know, like people on the waiting list for one day when they might need it, people need to be identified somehow.
That's what we're in the process of doing. Yeah.
But it's kind of surveying that group and asking them, what are you thinking you're needing, you know, and then matching it to their age and learning more about it.
Well, there's probably a way.
Do you want to go ahead with the last
Can I
one?
ask one question then?
Sure.
And we may not have this data. And I'm gonna kind of bounce back and forth, because there's really, although 1,500 on this last number, there's that other group of 988 that aren't don't have Medicaid. But the general thing is they're waiting 4 years on the waiting list. That's sort of our general number.
What's the CS number?
About 1 point, it's on that chart.
That's for community. That's for.
Community supports.
Community supports is about, right. That's
It's
right.
just everything but
this one is-
residential.
This one is IDR, right?
Right.
Okay. How long are these people waiting? I mean, I know that that's a general thing before, I mean, are these people, are they waiting 4 years? Or do we even know that?
So this is the unduplicated count that we've moved down. So it would be, some would be CS and some would be.
Yeah, we've
Okay.
got them all together.
Okay.
So we have, I don't think we've looked at this remaining 1,501 to say
Which waiting list they're waiting.
which waiting list they're on and therefore how long that.
So we don't know how long these people are waiting before they're offered service at this point.
On
average.
On average, as a whole, we do. So we would assume that that would be representative of these.
So what's the on average for these 1,500?
Well, that's what I'm saying. If it's true, if for these people, it would be 3.5 years,
Okay.
3.5 for IDRD and 1.9
Okay.
CS.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And a lot of people turn down CS, even though you try to explain to them, you know, all the services are on here except for residential. It's like, it's a capped waiver though. They want the uncapped.
Well, there's a difference between being offered something and turning it down and not having to wait to
Right.
get any offer at all. And I think those people are the ones who are really.
But you know, it has really significantly changed since 2014. We, our first trial waited 7 years on the CS to get a slot. The other, right after he got it, the other ones, bam, 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 bam. We got waiver slots. They waited maybe, you know, a year and a half. So it's just amazing. There has been a lot of movement on that list. But again, when everybody just goes on, takes a waiver slot and then just jumps back on the waiting list on the IDRD, it's kind of deceiving when you think they're not getting services, and they are.
Continue, please.
That was really the.
Did you want to go ahead with the critical,
I'd be glad to. go
waiting
through
list
if you'd
and-
like me to too.
if y'all wanna-
That may be the third sheet.
it is the third sheet.
Okay, so the critical needs list numbers, yes. As of the end of December, we had 91 people on the critical needs list. Between that data point and the prior month, we removed 24 individuals.
What is going on? Because I remember it was like in the 30s before. Why are we so high now?
Well, you know, that's a list that's, there's a lot of effort in getting a residential placement ready for someone
Yeah.
who has significant needs. And so it's based on the critical need of the person and how well matched they are to the location of the residential setting, the type of residential setting, and the providers that are able to take them.
And what are they doing? If they're in critical needs, I mean, you know, I see the head and spinal cord injury waiver that, I mean, they have no, you know, they put 13 on, they always take them off, they're always at 0. I would think that the critical needs, we should be able to get, you know, at least put them in one of our regional centers or something like that. I know everybody, you know, goes crazy about that, but,
No, I mean,
that
that's a
should
safety
be, I
net.
mean, that's our safety net, and why don't we get I mean, if they're in critical needs, they should we should have that in.
With them to reduce that number, and that number might actually increase by the time we identify all the folks that they have. So it is a serious number, and that's why we want to increase the capacity at Midland Center, another 13 beds. We, you know, got to do this, so we do have to fight for that budget.
So I don't know how well first of all, critical needs is,
Yeah, it's
iffy by definition. But then when we talk about hiring somebody to be down there every day, we also have to talk about a strategy, because this is one thing we do not communicate well.
Well, the other thing we need to do is we need to assess these people, Vicki.
Yeah.
So
but-
I think
so we
providers
don't know
are-
how I mean,
Yeah.
what is critical? But when we do have a great need and we can prove it, there has to be a strategy to prove it. And, you know, if we just give them a slide with critical needs on it, it's, you know, that they're not gonna. I'm
That's
just
what all
throwing
this,
that out.
no, but that's what all this deep dive's about, is to get good, solid data that has meaning and that can be translated into dollars. In my conversations down at the State House, that has been my underlying theme, is that we are working to streamline our data, to gather the data that we actually need to action, and then to have a 1, 3, 5-year plan for the growth of what the agency, of what we need to do. Not just say, oh, I think I need a house, but to say that we have the number, we have the people, we have the names that need to go into these placements, and to assess these folks and give the providers better information to where they're more apt to take the individuals. Right now, it's all on one little visit when they go see it. Yeah, it's not enough.
Susan, thank you. That gave me a lot of more information than I before. I appreciate it. That was great. At this time, we are going to go to executive session, motion to discuss personal issues. I just want to announce that our next regular meeting will be February 21st, and I hope to see y'all all there.